Magnus Carlsen is widely acknowledged as one of the greatest chess players to ever exist in the entire history. But being at the top means there will always be many preparing to dethrone him from that position. There is the next big of the chess world emerging as we speak. This video is about a child prodigy who gave the Magnus of the chess empire a run for his money. If you're an enthusiast just like me, you already know who I am talking about. Yep, Judith, the prodigy, Polgar. With a peak rating of 2735, she is the youngest grandmaster, beating Bobby Fischer when she was just 15. I mean, she was tracing the chessboard at an age where people normally step on Legos. Now, the room was filled with anticipation. I mean, just this once, life seemed to be not so normal. While the audience was used to watching Magnus take the win, this time it was different. Polgar had the record to show that she could steal the show, and it was clear with the look on Carlsen's face that every step he took, every move he made, was as careful as walking on thin ice. Could he sink this time, tarnishing his legacy he built brick by brick? It might just seem like a game of chess, but to be at this point and to sit on those chairs, those two had done absolutely everything in their power. If you were in that room, I am sure you would feel the tension too. But let's break the ice and talk about what he did. Carlsen started with a generic move, the standard d5, and Polgar replied with an f6, adopting the king's Indian defense. Now, up until this point, things aren't as interesting. It is just a typical high-level matchup with a lot of space on the board. There were options, but to be able to know the wrong option from the right is what a pro does. Carlsen took his time to put the CNE pawns into the center. Polgar again defended her king with the bishop at g7. The game looked good for Carlsen, but the problem was it was looking great for Polgar. The Magnus vs the prodigy, what a match. At this point, they both had their disarrayed outcomes. As Carlsen lined his pawns, Judith set a subtle trap with all of hers to her advantage. You could tell that every move was stressful for both of them. But Polgar, despite playing chess, also had a poker face. Maybe she wasn't done executing her game plan, but there was a twist with Polgar's queenside underdeveloped in an odd, for lack of a better word, variation. Carlsen made the move and attacked, executing knight g3 to reroute his piece to a, let's say, more active square. Maybe she was setting a trap for the Magnus, we never know. Maybe she already knew his move. The thing with the champion is, all of his moves are studied, and she might have known what he would do in that situation. Polgar was quick to respond with a rather odd move. This was an unconventional approach, as she played her knight to a6, a move that defies the standard chess principles. Well, to beat the best you have to find different ways. By this time, many knew she had a sinister plan in mind. But then Carlsen was quick to understand what was going on. People who come from practice make perfect are much more organized and don't go too far with their creative moves, while that move was proof that she was a prodigy. Anyway, Carlsen hit back with a bishop f2 and waited for Polgar to make a castling move. Judith went ahead with her queen on c6 and Carlsen castled. Polgar's poker face was unhinged with Carlsen at an advantage. Her expression made it seem like the game was finely balanced. Imagine seeing a little ray of hope and then looking at the opponent as nonchalant. It was like he felt like he walked right into a trap. Well, Polgar attacked. It was with an e5 to bust the d5 right open. Carlsen quickly took his defense, locking the center. But while he was busy defending, Polgar created threats on the king's side with h5. That was no ordinary one. You see, that move was very aggressive, almost like Polgar was bullying Carlsen at this point. Carlsen knew he was in a quicksand now, and he is only going to sink from here on. But from here on, Carlsen picked himself up and began fighting back. Queen to d2 sets up a strong position for Magnus, and things get interesting as Judith kicks out his knight and brings in her own. The game shows why Judith is a tough opponent. She makes a bold move with f5, aiming to swap pieces on Magnus's side and apply pressure. Magnus responds by moving his knight to f3, making room for his bishop. In the heat of the game, Judith locks up her pawn chain and Magnus slides his bishop back to a safer spot. Then, Judith pulls off a surprising move with knight to g3, sacrificing it strategically. If Magnus takes with his pawn, black would recapture, winning the bishop and exposing Magnus's vulnerable white king. Magnus has to tread carefully, so he moves his rook out of harm's way. But it was like Polgar was 5 steps ahead of Carlsen. Judith cleverly blocks off Magnus's dark square bishop, forcing him to make a decision. Despite the risks, Magnus decides to trade his knight for Judith's bishop. It's a critical moment in the game, and Magnus knows he needs to be cautious, especially with his queen stuck on the back rank. Seeing this, Magnus plays his queen to g5, targeting Judith's undefended pawn. Although Judith can't defend against Magnus's move, she finds a clever way to respond. She slides her queen to a more active square, creating another threat with his knight. This forces Black's queen to move, allowing Magnus to pick up the pawn on g3. In the midst of the action, Judith moves her bishop to a more strategic spot. Magnus, sensing an opportunity, slides his king up, looking to transfer a rook to the open h file. Black makes some adjustments, moving her less-than-stellar knight to a better square and shifting the rook to attack Magnus's bishop. After careful thought, Judith moves her king to g7, deciding not to retreat from her highly active bishop. The game unfolds with both players making bold and strategic moves, highlighting the intense emotional and tactical nature of this high-stakes match. This is the critical moment when Magnus suggests trading queens, a move that Judith promptly accepts. Going into an endgame against Magnus is no small risk, considering his reputation as the best endgame player in history, capable of turning seemingly dire situations into draws. Despite the danger, Judith trades queens, setting the stage for a pivotal moment. Post-queen trade, Judith spots a brilliant bishop sacrifice that Magnus willingly accepts. Unbeknownst to Judith, Magnus had foreseen this sacrifice, recognizing that he could move his king in time to trap the knight, rendering it useless. This series of moves leaves Judith in a precarious position, trailing in material, time, and overall position. The situation becomes increasingly dire for her. Though rook a6 clings to her d6 pawn, Magnus, seemingly unfazed, disregards it, as the knight on a1 is now under his control. Judith, in a desperate move, targets Magnus's knight on b5. But this only deepens her predicament. Magnus secures a 2-point material advantage in what is now a winning endgame. Magnus's strategy becomes clear: defend his pawns, trade off pieces, and secure victory against the widely regarded best female chess player of all time. Judith attempts an attack on Magnus's g2 pawn, but he adeptly covers it. In a final desperate move, Judith aims to capture White's isolated pawn on b6. Only 2 fall into Magnus's trap. The game concludes as Magnus plays knight b2, preventing Judith from taking his pawn. Realizing the inevitable, Judith resigns, and Magnus retains his title as the undisputed chess world champion. The players exchange a handshake, with Magnus standing as the victorious champion.